I'd like to begin with a short passage that I wrote some time ago after a moving conversation with a patient. Care is seen through a patient's eyes. Who am I? Do you really know? Have you any idea where this journey began for me? What pain I have endured or the suffering my illness has put my family through? Yet I have reached a stage where care and compassion seem to have evaporated. To whom do I belong now? Does my former life count for nothing? Am I invisible? I was once strong. I had a purpose in life, fulfilled daily tasks, had pride in myself, but now I am weakened by the disease that has taken over my life. Who takes responsibility for me now? Helpless, I listen as I am passed from pillar to post. Words are scrawled across my notes, empty, harsh words, for discharge to the community. What care you for me? Is my pain under control? Are my symptoms managed well enough to discharge me? Or is it a matter of that's someone else's problem, not yours? This is not a palliative care ward, I hear you say. Well, in God's name, point me to the palliative care ward, where I might experience compassion and real care. Where anyone will see me for who I am. Where someone will care enough to be responsible for my holistic well-being. For, believe it or not, I am still me. I think, I feel, and I need just as I always did. I'm just tired and in pain. My pride is still intact. I realise that you can no longer mend me, but please don't break me. I deserve more. Let the compassion be yours. The patients for whom time is of the essence, it should begin now. Some years ago, I found myself caring for my daughter Louise, as she had breast cancer at the age of just 26. Louise underwent chemotherapy to shrink the tumour, then a mastectomy, returning to work as soon as she possibly could. Sadly, sometime later it was necessary for Louise to resume treatment. Chemo and 33 doses of radium followed. When you are caring for someone so dear to you, you tend to shy away from the thoughts of end-of-life care. Instead, you carry on as normal, dealing with issues if and when they should arise. You struggle on, never daring to let the words dying enter your head, for fear it might actually cause it to become reality. So you continue in this world of make-believe, choosing not to acknowledge the inevitable. Time passes and you're afraid to think of the consequences of losing your beautiful child. Therefore, conversations, crucial conversations, never take place. Then, suddenly and inevitably, the day comes when your loved one weakens before your eyes. I could no longer pretend. Fear filled every cell of my body. My eyes that were blinkered saw the harsh reality of the situation. My ears that had filtered certain words were as clear as a bell, and the worst of all, I was overcome with a feeling of helplessness. Louisa's death was cruel, to say the least. She had suffered so very badly throughout her cancer journey. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. I shall spare you those details, but her death seemed to come quickly and unexpectedly. Or was it that I fought so hard not to allow any thoughts of death to enter our world, instead choosing only to harbour hope? Having not received any help during Louisa's illness, and therefore not having any relevant conversations, when Louisa's condition deteriorated, through both fear and ignorance, I called 999, an action that filled me with guilt to this day. I realised that Louise was bleeding internally, and I was unable to comfort her or indeed ease her pain. The ambulance took 4 hours to arrive, despite numerous calls and even a plea to the police for help. My daughter died in accident and emergency on a busy Friday evening, in full view of everyone. She died from multiple stomach ulcers that burst. Suddenly I was numb. Voices seemed distant and muffled. The tick of the clock was deafening, and my troubles were just beginning. Just before Louise died, the doctor called me to one side and talked about giving her a massive dose of steroids. And he said that I had to make a big decision. Thankfully, I never had to make any decisions. Louise died naturally. It was out of my hands. When my head cleared, I began to realise that we had never had any conversations about what Louise wanted in the way of care. The words palliative, end of life, terminal or death were never in our vocabulary. Those words at the time spelt fear beyond measure, and yet now I am consumed with regret. Had we been brave enough to consider the thought that she may die, we may have had conversations with the doctors about advanced care planning, which may even have resulted in Louise dying at home in my arms, as we might have wished. Dying is a natural process which comes to us all, so I'd say to you all, be ready for it, be brave and have the conversations. Guilt is not an easy option, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Being a carer can be a difficult time, especially if it entails caring for someone at the end of their life. We all want the best death for a loved one, but sadly this doesn't always happen, often leaving a carer with a burden of guilt. If the person that you are caring for dies in an acute hospital, this can have a devastating effect on you, especially if that person's wishes were to die at home. Caring for someone doesn't stop the moment we hand responsibility over to the hospital staff, and yet often we feel cut off at this point, like our loved one has been wrenched from us and everything is out of control. It's so hard to take a step back when you've been the main carer, and in some cases for a considerable amount of time. When someone is in pain or distressed, physically or emotionally, then as a carer, our instinct is to comfort them in whatever way we can. The inability to do this fills you with a feeling of helplessness at a time when your need to care is at its strongest. I found myself struggling to cope with the comprehensive drugs regimes, Louise's needs and the well-being of two small grandsons. Both Louise and I had questions we needed to ask, and yet there was no one to help. I was told by professionals that I was coping so well, when actually I was screaming on the inside, and nobody noticed. I didn't realise that I could ask for help because no one had told me. Eventually, my mum came to the rescue when she moved to Bristol to help take care of the boys while I concentrated on Louise. As a full-time carer, I definitely had needs of my own, which I did not address because my only concern was the well-being of Louise. After losing Louise, I began to realise that many other people would find themselves in just such a position, and then I knew that I had to campaign to change things in the future. I was able to look back and see that during those last months in Bristol, so much precious time was wasted. Instead of using time wisely and living life to the full, we were preoccupied with just coping with each day due to lack of support. How marvellous it would have been to have had a centre of support and information, for with that kind of help, Louise may have died at home as we had wished, and I would not live with the guilt that still weighs me down.